Hey YouTube, how's it going? I hope you're excited because today I'm going to talk about psychology, specifically 5 of the myths that people spread around quite frequently when it comes to the topic. So keep watching as I debunk these 5 psychology myths. When we find out something about psychology or science that we think is really cool, it's really easy to spread it around, to tell people what we found out. And what happens so many times is we will hear something that isn't actually true and we'll tell our friends, and that myth's truth will get spread like wildfire until this scientific or psychological myth will be a part of pop culture. Now prepare to be surprised as we go into these 5 psychology myths. Myth number 1 is that the color red, when worn by somebody, makes the individual more attractive to the person perceiving them. Although this myth has been very frequently distributed, talked about, and heard, studies that have been replicated show that those who wore the color red were not perceived as significantly more attractive than those who wore any other color. So, with that, you can stop wearing red and wear whatever color you would like. Myth number 2 is photographic memory. You may have heard someone tell you that they have photographic memory. They can see a scene and they will be able to remember exactly what happened, exactly how it looked. This actually, according to studies, is not at all true. Those who claim to have a photographic memory very well may simply have an eidetic memory, which allows their mind to categorize and organize information much more efficiently than those who do not have an eidetic memory. Furthermore, it is not true to believe that because we remember something that it is fact, because 2 things will happen quite frequently. 1, when we recall a memory, our mind will fill in the blanks by putting certain details that aren't actually accurate so that it will make more sense and flow more when we recall the memory. Another thing that will happen is false memories, which is when, for some reason or another, a memory we have never actually occurred. Sometimes that can be in the form of believing we did a thing as a child and therefore that memory is in our minds, when in reality it's not a memory, it's just what we felt or thought happened. And another thing that happens sometimes is we intend to say something, and so when we recall the experience, we believe we actually said it. Kind of like when I tell my wife that I told her something, and then she tells me that I never said that, and I say, what the heck, I remember saying that, and she'll say, no, you never said it. Sometimes what's happening there is I have a false memory. And this happens to every single person, so we need to be aware of that. This myth about our memory being fact has been debunked. Myth number 3 is that of subliminal image learning. There was a time when movie theaters would insert images. They would be for a very brief moment of time. And in these images, they would try to get the customers to buy more drinks, buy more popcorn, by telling them to drink or eat, or by inserting pictures of the different things that they could purchase in that short amount of time. The idea was that you wouldn't be able to notice the pictures, they passed by way too quickly, but you could notice it subconsciously according to those who did it. They even had a study which, according to them, proved that this worked to increase sales. However, that study has since been falsified, and further studies have been conducted which prove subliminal image learning in this sense does not work to increase sales or to affect the behavior of those who are subject to it. So I'm sorry, but you're not going to be able to use this to your advantage anytime soon. Myth number 4 is that some people are either left brain oriented or right brain oriented. This is a myth that we hear all the time. People will say, I'm creative, so I must be right brain. And some people will say that they're mathematical or logical, and therefore they are left brain. This is a complete myth. The only reason people believe it is because everyone talks about it. There isn't any scientific evidence to support this. In fact, the scientific evidence disproves it. One of the notions behind it is that certain hemispheres of the brain are more focused on either logical or artistic talent. But let's think about it this way. The famous musicians we all love from the classical era, with beautiful masterpieces, and even the music today, are not simply artistic in the sense that they are the opposite of logic. In fact, they're very methodical, and it takes almost a mathematical approach to make it work. Classical symphonic music had a very specific way of being laid out. It was a very logical process that someone who was merely artistic but not logical could not be able to perform. Both the left and the right hemisphere of the brain work together, and they both cumulatively are responsible for all the different things that we are able to do. Myth number 5 is my favorite to debunk. It is the most perpetuated psychological myth out there. It's one you hear on TV shows or movies like Limitless or Lucy, or it's things that you'll hear doctors say or scientists. It's something that appeals to our imagination. The myth I'm going to end off with is the myth that humans only use 10% of their brain. To explain why this is such a big myth, I don't even have to go into all the different explanations that I have for you. All I have to really tell you is that if you search on any page what the biggest myth about psychology is, this will be their answer. I will, however, give a few reasons why this is false. One reason is that scientific studies prove it. Through brain scan imaging, we can clearly see that while someone is alive, all parts of their brain are active, at least a little. There is no part of the brain that is not active. Secondly, we know through a thing called synaptic pruning that when certain parts of the brain are not active, they start to degenerate. If certain parts of our brains were not active at all times, through autopsies of the brain, you would clearly be able to see tons of degeneration. Another reason is that when it comes to adaptation, if we didn't need to use all of our brain, and it would, in a sense, be limiting us because not only is it hard on childbirth when the child's head is so large, but also it would give advantages in running or certain physical activity. It would just make more sense if we didn't need all our brain for survival, that we wouldn't have all of it. Another reason why we don't just use 10% of our brain is because every inch of the brain has a purpose. One part of the brain is responsible for controlling our motor functions. Another part of the brain is responsible for memory. Another part of the brain is responsible for being able to speak. Another part of the brain is for perceiving sensory information. The list goes on, and without all these different functions, we wouldn't be able to survive properly. And we need our whole brain to pull that off. I want you to take all this information that I gave you and be a force for removing the myths and the pop culture psychology that is so prevalent today. Spread some of the knowledge around. But I don't want you to go just yet. If you did enjoy watching this video, click one of the playlists or choose another video to watch instead to feed that brain of yours. The playlist this video is in is linked in the comments section, so you can check the rest of them out. You're watching Freedom Thinks with Timothy Rogers. Subscribe to never miss out. I'll see you in the next video.